Damien Hines.
Thank you, Chair. Stuart, just what we were talking a moment ago about inequalities. Can you just say how the demographic inequalities pattern is in Scotland? And do you benchmark sort of within the four home nations how those patterns vary, or are they essentially the same?
Well, I think the criteria will be similar, if not the same, but we obviously use SIND data in Scotland. It highlights almost to ward level where there are deep areas of deprivation. The focus for us, Damien, is looking at infrastructure. So how do you can't sustain activity and support communities if there aren't the people and the facilities, and that could be outside as well as indoor to do that. I guess we have, as sport, we haven't managed, I think, to have a sustained collaborative effort in some of those communities. There's been lots of great work, don't get me wrong, but there's a sustained collaborative effort nationally and locally, I think offers some good opportunity. But it will take a focus. So what we're doing as a national agency is as part of the recovery, our plan will see us narrow the number of things we're doing, and it will narrow the areas of focus in which we will put as much of our support as we can. We're still working with all 32 geographies in Scotland, which is important, because it's important that we see progress and engagement in all areas. But I think, given the period we've just been through, one of the most difficult societal periods, certainly in my lifetime, probably beyond that, we need to try something different.
Thank you. And Tim, thank you. You told us in this, it was almost exactly a year ago, I think, when we met, that closing the gender activity gap was a priority, had been even before the coronavirus. And in your most recent active lives, although the activity levels seem to drop, not by a huge amount, but for both genders, and sort of more or less in parallel, but you concluded that there might be more support required to, particularly for some women, to get women's sport and activity back to pre-COVID levels. Can you just give us an update on progress to date, or probably more likely plans for the near future, how to make that happen?
Yes, absolutely. And you're quite right. I remember that session well and that conversation. And it had been a focus prior to the pandemic for some time to seek to drive change, because I think there'd been just a long-term trend of women and girls being less involved. So some of that has been about our immediate response. I think in thinking about our COVID response, we've been disproportionately ambitious to work with organisations, whether that's governing bodies or other sports clubs, that can demonstrate that they're making their opportunities available to women and girls. We've been thinking very much about the age groups concerned as well. For example, I think the pandemic has shown us that the opportunity, particularly during the lockdown, for younger girls to consider activity more informally in the home, where there's less judgment, where there's less expectation, where it could be very much on their own terms. That actually saw a positive increase in the numbers of people engaging. So there's a definite lesson there that I think we can involve more on terms that make sense for the majority of those people. Activities that can support them. So, for example, we'll be investing now within school-age girls a program called Studio U, which is going into schools to support, in a sort of Netflix-style platform, teachers and PE and sports teachers to consider how to make activity that will engage all girls at that age more effective and more positive. At the other end of the spectrum, we're very conscious of older women and their activity levels and the need for them to maintain that. And so, for example, thinking about organised and structured investment into walking groups and other areas, running groups as well. So I think on the whole, it's still through the prism of the understanding of the challenge, which is that the sector historically has made more women and girls feel that it wasn't for them through often the judgment and the setups and the structures the This Girl Can campaign remains very central for us as being a way of trying to bust some of those myths, and also to make sure that all women and girls realise that, movement, being physically active, playing sport can be a critical part of their lives.
Thank you. I want to come back to children in a moment, Tim, but Stuart, can I just turn to you first and ask, do you have a similar pattern on gender gap in Scotland, and what is your approach? What are your plans to address?
Yes, it is similar. In the latest data that came out around activity, just in August past there, it was 51 male, 42 female, and meeting the guidelines. So there's still a gap in participation terms for all the reasons that Tim was talking about. There is still issues about attracting young girls into activity. But I'll come back to what we're going to do in a second. But in terms of, I think it's more important now, and you might hear me say this a couple of times now, I think government, ourselves as key agencies, local authorities, I think need to put health and well-being at the centre of the future, because the experience we've just gone through, I think, has been pretty challenging in physical and mental health, and on our immune system resilience. Now, the benefits of physical activity are clear in all of those areas now. So I think there's food for thought for all of us. We have a major programme in Scotland called Active Schools, Damien, which is now 16 years old. As an investor, this has been a partnership between ourselves and the 32 authorities, which sees a coordinator touch every single school. We've got almost 400 coordinators in Scotland, and through this vehicle, we've had some success in trying to narrow that gap, but I think we need to take it to another level. And the school environment, working around the school as a hub in each of those communities, is a way to try and do that. But I'm probably sounding like a broken record. We need people to work together to do this. It can't just, Sport Scotland does very little on its own. We have to work with local and national partners with a clear, agreed plan to try and make some inroads into some of these issues. So women and girls, for me, is a focus for Active Schools. And the other key programme we have is community sport hubs, where we now have over 200 community hubs, of which I think there is the potential now to attach running, again, as Tim said, running groups, walking groups that are very much about activity as opposed to maybe competitive sport. It can all work together.
Thank you. Tim, in the Active Lives Children's Survey that came out in January, that showed a fall in the number of children meeting the CMO guideline, 60 minutes a day guideline. Although, to be fair, probably a smaller fall, I suspect, than many of us would have expected or feared. On the other hand, it still showed, more than half of children and young people are not reaching that benchmark. What are we going to do to make a material difference to the number of kids getting 60 minutes a day, half of them in school? Half of them in school.
I think you probably, sorry. You've highlighted really well, actually probably one of the principal areas of focus, not just for Sports England, but I think for us as a nation. I think the activity levels of our children and young people should be front and centre in all of our thinking. And I think there are a number of ways in the very short term we're helping to seek to address that. In investment terms, I think one of the most successful things that we can and continue to do is to provide opportunities in the school day, which you'll know better than most on this committee is the responsibility of the Department for Education. Some of the actions that were in the School Sport and Activity Action Plan that came in while you were still Secretary of State, that still remains fundamental to actually getting a successful program of activity in school. So it's not only about the formal sports lessons and PE, but it's also about activity during the school day that really matters. Some of the programs, and we've seen the success of the Daily Mile, that sense that every day there is some activity built into young people's lives alongside their lessons is really critical. I think for me, that's how at primary level, we're investing as a nation in our young people, must be much more focused on their overall physical literacy. That will be probably the biggest single change that we can make in driving the overall activity through their childhood and then into their adult lives. At the moment, we should be really keenly focused on our youngest people in primary schools, not necessarily specializing in sports too soon or too early, but understanding basic competence, understanding basic confidence, and most importantly, having a fun and enjoyable experience. I think we should be thinking much more about that at this stage as a really key factor. But then as you get into, sorry, I was just going to say one more thing. As you get into secondary school, then I think when actual team sports and the availability of games to be played at a more structured and traditional level is really important too. And one of the great interventions that we've seen going into the summer term, and we hope over the summer holidays, is the creation of a fantastic hub that we've helped to support. The governing bodies have helped put together, and the Youth Sport Trust have been central to its delivery, where there's now a huge suite of opportunities, information, guidance to teachers about what's possible in school, what's possible under social distance guidelining, and more importantly, how they can re-engage kids in those sports. And we've seen nearly 5,000 schools take that activity hub up since it was launched. And I think combined with some of the other areas of investment, our continued investment in training for secondary school PE teachers, and so that they can understand better the expectations of the children and getting a generally more inclusive environment together. Definitely thinking about the role of the school games, definitely thinking about the opening up that the Department for Education is currently funding through Sports England of school facilities after hours. So there's a number of practical ways that we can do it. But if we can build physical literacy in our youngest children, if we can create genuinely inclusive environments in secondary schools, and then perhaps finally, if we can actually move to the current government's manifesto commitment in 2019 to put well-being more centrally in the Ofsted measurement and think very clearly about what that means in terms of the whole school day, but particularly the school PE and school sport, then I think those three structural measures would probably be transformational to what is, as you rightly point out, a very significant challenge.
So, Tim, I mean, you mentioned physical literacy, and I think that's incredibly important. Of course, it also links very strongly to mental health. And we now have the new relationships, sex and health education curriculum in school, which can help to support that, and hopefully can leverage the concerns I think a lot of people rightly have around children and young people's mental health to also encourage more physical activity. So last question from me, Chair, is again to Tim, although Stuart may want to chip in as well. So one action from the school sports school sports and activity action plan was to get this message out about the 60 minutes a day and to put it on a par with 5 a day, which everybody knows, to really grab it home to our whole society, our whole community. So short of a multi-million-pound TV campaign, or maybe these days it has to be a sort of online influencer campaign, what can we do to really get this message out there, to normalize it, to make it part of daily life for our whole nation?
Well, I personally would welcome a look from government and the Department for Education at that sort of campaign, actually, in terms of whether or not we can make the message more central. You're absolutely right. The average of 60 minutes a day from the Chief Medical Officer guidelines is a crucial benchmark for how children are going to then benefit, not only physically, but as you say, very much their mental health. And indeed, consequently their attainment in schools. The evidence that emerging, we have a particularly close relationship in the city of Bradford through one of our local delivery pilots. And the unequivocal evidence emerging there is where young people there in Bradford are more physically active, they are benefiting not only in terms of their mental health, but their attainment in schools. So we've got such a positive opportunity here. I think from our point of view, it's about the mix of demand and supply, for want of a better way of putting it. It's very easy to think about supply. Can we open up the facilities more? Yes, we can. And I think some of the investment that's going into that now is really important. Our structures like the school games, whether it's at the local school level through to the national finals, providing a really great way for our young people to be engaged. Yes, they are. Are we thinking specifically about the ways that governing bodies and the local club network out of school are engaging young people and allowing them to play sport? But I think actually we mustn't ever lose sight of making sure that young people realise the benefit to them and feel welcomed, feel included, and most of all, feel that being active is fun and enjoyable. I can't stress enough that one of the biggest learnings that we have from all the research that we've done and all the conversations that we have and the work all our partners are doing in this area is that if it's enjoyable, if whether it's in school, if the PE lesson and the sport lesson feels inclusive, feels engaging, it's not just about the traditional sporty types. And then out of school, whether it's with parents and families or whether it's in clubs, those involved have the capacity not just to teach a great forward defence, personally I think that's very important, but a great forward defence or a great backhand or the ability to trap a football, but also know how to make that feel like it's fun, something that people want to return to, something that actually they look forward to, and something that they think their friends and they are going to enjoy. That probably is where we as a sector, again, talking to Stuart's message about the need for collaboration, that's where we need to come together. We need to understand that people making it fun and safe and places that make sense for people to go are going to be critical to the long-term health of the nation, because our young people have got to sustain that into their adult life.
Thank you, Tim. Stuart, did you want to add a word?
Yeah, I would just add a quick word on the messaging piece, Damien, because I think that to me is the key. Our partnership with Public Health Scotland, which is a new body only last April, what an introduction they've had to the world. What attracted me, Damien, was the potential, if you add the Chief Medical Officer's Department to Public Health to sport, and you add education, and we have a collaborative, consistent message that goes to as far and as wide as we can, then that is powerful. But at the moment, we had some difficult conversations with Public Health Scotland about how we would fit and work together, where physical activity sat alongside diet and healthy weight. But I think we've resolved that now. It's pretty clear. It's a priority for Public Health Scotland, and I'm looking forward to really getting those big messages that you're talking about there out there in a much wider sense across a range of partners.
Thank you, Stuart. Back to you, Jeff.